is Served, featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live, Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Justice is Served. It is the 1st of July. That means we're coming up on the 4th of July, and as a special, we're going to do all Supreme Court type cases, ones that are very relevant right now and that potentially affect you. And if you don't think they affect you, we're going to tell you why they do affect you. In fact, and why you should actually be thinking about them instead of just being passive and be like, I don't care. You should care.
Very engaging.
And that's what the 4th of July means. Caring.
That's a great interpretation. I like it.
Right. That's
I
right.
like it a lot.
And we have Chelsea Galicia.
Hi there. Thank you.
And I am Phil Svitek, filling in for the great Sarah Azaria.
Thanks for doing this.
Of course. When duty calls, you step in.
Yeah, we're going to have a thrilling conversation about 4 of the biggest Supreme Court decisions that have come out in the last week. And I'm very excited to break it down just in case any of these confused you or you didn't know what this meant for your rights.
That's right.
We're talking responsibilities.
We're talking about love wins. We're talking about the death penalty, Obamacare, and housing discrimination.
Yes, sir. We are.
So I think the one that everyone's most aware of is love wins, which is to say, of course, the Gay Marriage Act.
Yes. So, of course, this has been in the works for like decades now, the movement to make marriage between a man and another man and a woman and another woman the same validity in the eyes of the law as a man and a woman. But Sarah and I have both come out and told you in the last couple of weeks, as we've been waiting for this case to come down, that we thought it would come down the way that it did. And the reason why is that anybody who has sat in a constitutional law class and hasn't been sort of blinded by the religious reasons can see very plainly that the writing on the wall has been that this was the way it had to go down. Starting way back in, well, probably even before this, but in 1967, I think, for me, was when I saw this case in law school. I was like, oh, the gay marriage thing is completely happening after this one case. So, oddly enough, this was a case, 1967, Loving versus Virginia.
To be fair, you weren't in school during 1967,
no,
correct?
But
we were. Just want to make sure, it's for
clarity. In law school, you go back through old cases.
Yes.
That's all law school is just reading case after case after case, trying to figure out the reasoning, because it's not just what the court said in like the 2-second snippet of the result, but the reasoning that went behind it, which depends a lot on the words of the Constitution, depends on the words of the law that's being challenged, and depends a lot on what the court has said before on similar situations or on cases that are relevant to this. So in terms of marriage, the case of Loving versus Virginia was a really important case. That was a case that allowed interracial marriage, because before that there was a law that said a black person can't marry a white person, and an interracial couple sued and ultimately won. And the reasoning behind that, the justices said, is that marriage is a fundamental right. And when you hear the Supreme Court say that anything is a fundamental right, it is virtually impossible for the government to infringe upon that right. Virtually impossible, not totally impossible, but it's a really, really difficult standard. They have to prove that there is some really great government interest in that kind of discrimination against allowing for that fundamental right. So once I saw that case, I was like, there is no way that marriage can be denied to same-sex couples if marriage is a fundamental right. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm gonna take a different stance. Categorize it however you want. It's a different stance at the end of the day, and it's because we're coming up with it. I'm gonna call this the 4th of July special, right?
Okay.
One of the things, because sooner or later this had to happen.
Yep.
In one way, shape, or form. And to bring politics into it, one of the things that why I feel like China at the end of the day, as much as they're on the uprise, the reason why I don't think they'll be at the level that the United States is at have a form of amendments like this, right? And in the sense that, it was only going to be a matter, whether it happened, last Friday or whenever, it was always going to happen. People were this was a social movement. People were upset by it. People want it to happen. And that's what's great about the United States is that, yes, things get delayed, especially in the justice process.
Yeah.
But because, if people want it to happen and they want it to happen strong enough, sooner or later it will. And the fact that you can have social justices enacted in that way is a very still powerful form of social community.
Idea that you were so worldly, Phil, that you would know about Chinese law. I have been to China, and I did not know that about China. I have no idea about the way that China's laws are, but that is one of the great things about our law is that we have the Constitution and the amendments, which are were always intended to be like living, breathing documents. So it's not like you just read the black letter of the law, and if it doesn't fit in there, it doesn't exist. So there was one of the judges who was on the dissent, who did not agree with the majority on this, who said that this is the court making up law, that this is not a right that is in the Constitution. This has nothing to do with the Constitution. That's what the Chief Justice. Well, it does a lot, and it does have to do with the Constitution. We have the 14th Amendment, equal protection. We have fundamental right of marriage that has been decided by stare decisis. It's that whole thing about it's like precedents. So other cases before it, including not just Loving versus Virginia, but we've had other cases, Lawrence v. Texas, where the Supreme Court ruled that a state cannot have a law against sodomy, that what people do in the privacy of their own homes that does not harm anyone is none of the government's business. The government or the Supreme Court has also said that prisoners have a right to marry. So you're going to let, serial murderers have the right to marry and not gay people? It just doesn't make sense. Given the line of cases that have come out before. And so when you look at the same way that all other cases are decided, it's not just looking black and white, what's in the Constitution and what's in the letter of the law, but looking at what the cases decided before it have laid out as precedent. So it completely has everything to do with the Constitution and the amendments, and to say that it is not at all related to it, that this was only a social movement that people wanted, and that's how this came to be, is what I think is be inaccurate.
I think that's a fair point, but even if it was just a social movement, that's the whole point, is that it can be, and if enough people want it in that way, then it can happen.
And if it's an expression of freedom and liberty and all these great things that this country was founded on, and we can point it back to, the Constitution, then yes. And I saw one of the dissenting justices were like, well, now this means that we can have plural marriage. People marry more than one person by the same logic. And I didn't exactly see that, but I mean, truthfully, if people want to do that, I don't know if the government can really stop them unless there is shown to be a harm, maybe to children or to some. That was the early movement against gay marriage, was that it's harmful to children. But the studies have come out that it is not harmful to children. Children have been raised in same-sex parent households and have turned out just fine. And so because of that...
Sometimes even better.
Right. And because of that argument lost all the wind in its sails. And, I don't know if people will now take up the plural marriage cause, but I highly doubt it. But if we can show that it is not a harm to anyone, then perhaps they're right. But this didn't happen just by itself the one day the Supreme Court decided. There was a lot of movement in the states and among all of us as Americans who wanted it to go this way. Polls after poll after poll showed that more and more people were accepting of same-sex couples. I think early this year, 37 states and D.C. had legalized same-sex marriage. So the states were already on this path. And in early 2015, so this year, polls said that the acceptance of the American people of gay marriage was at 60%. So this was preceded by a lot of acceptance, and this is what people actually wanted. And some people said, well, this is an issue for the states to decide. Each individual state should be able to decide it by popular vote. That's what democracy means. But this is why we have a Supreme Court, because what if one day we all decided in the state of California, every guy named Phil goes to jail, and we decided that, popular vote, democracy at its finest, we got to choose that every guy named Phil goes to jail, and you sue and say, well, this isn't fair, and it goes, the court of Supreme Court of California says, sorry, dude, this is what the law says. Your name is Phil. You go to jail. You take it up to the Supreme Court, and they would look at the Constitution and be like, sorry, California, I realize that you want all guys named Phil to go to jail, but this violates our Constitution. You can't do that. And that's why leaving it up to the states entirely is kind of being ignorant of the purpose of having a Supreme Court. I thought that was kind of a silly argument that people are like, well, let's just leave it to the states. Well, you can't leave everything to the states, or else why the heck do we have a Supreme Court in the first place? So this one was decided correctly, for sure.
In some ways, I'm just obviously I'm happy for the reasons that everyone should be happy, but I'm also happy, like, in the spirit of which this is intended. I'm glad we can just move on.
Oh my gosh.
There's so many other important cases. Like, this is, in many ways, for lack of a better term, it's a no-brainer. Like,
yes,
okay, let's just
absolutely
done. Let's move on with our lives, and let's figure out something that obviously this affects a lot of people very positively, some not so positively in their eyes.
We are so late to the game on this one. My favorite part of watching all these people get upset about the ruling is they're like, oh, forget it, I'm moving to Canada, or even Mexico. Both of those places have gay marriage. In fact, Canada legalized it, if you want to call it that, 10 years ago, almost to the day before we did. So it is way about time. I think you're right. And we join in the celebration, but we are ready to move on to bigger, badder battles now that everybody can get married. Does it make you want to get married anymore than before? Right?
Good luck to everybody. I'm not getting married.
I know. The people who really want out are wedding planners and divorce attorneys. And hopefully there will be people out there that aren't as cynical as I am about marriage, who will really enjoy this new right that they already always had.
Why, you hate marriage?
I don't know if I hate marriage. Yeah. It's just a little.
Fair enough.
How's that for an explanation?
Well, while we're on grim views, let's talk about the something quite important, the death penalty. Yeah,
so the Supreme Court didn't talk about or didn't decide a case about whether the death penalty is constitutional, although two of the justices in this opinion raised that issue. But this was a case about a guy facing lethal injection who sued the state of Oklahoma because one of the drugs used in the 3 drugs was said to be unreliable. So what happened is a couple of years ago, there was a lot of pressure on a manufacturer to stop producing a drug that was used to put people to death. And so they substituted that with something else. And so I think 3 executions that used this drug seemed to go on for a long time, and the person seemed to be in a lot of pain, agony. And so for that reason, the person facing their execution with this drug involved said that this was a violation of their 8th Amendment right against cruel and unusual punishment. So they sued and tried to show that it's a very painful, slow death because this one drug is supposed to knock you out unconscious while they administer the other 2 drugs that sort of paralyze all your muscles, your heart, and everything, which lead to your death. But the justices said, sorry, man, we can't promise you a painless death. We would all love a painless death, but not all of us have the good fortune of having a painless death. You didn't prove that it was, even if it's, I don't know if they said quite, even if it's unreliable, it works, and you didn't provide any alternative, which I thought was kind of weird. I didn't think somebody had to present an alternative, but it's what they said is sorry, too bad. This was decided. The majority were the very conservative judges, and 2 of the very liberal justices who dissented said, this actually raises the whole issue of, is the death penalty itself constitutional? Because the death penalty is being used less and less, maybe it's now unusual. It's not as usual as it was before. And also he commented on the fact that it's applied sort of arbitrarily, depending on, what state you were convicted in, and that it doesn't seem to be applied very fairly. And then again, there's always those people that we're finding were either put to death or about to be put to death that were not guilty of their crimes in the first place. And so, it makes this whole thing questionable. So I thought it was very interesting, the issue raising about whether death penalty is constitutional. I think that within the next 20 years, they're going to say it's not constitutional. But in the meantime, if you do something bad, your death might be painful. Not just bad, but like you kill somebody. If you're given the death penalty, it might hurt when you die. What do you think about that? Is that fair?
Have they taken away hanging? Because here's the thing, right? A lot of people think and I'm not trying to be like crude about this, but that you have the noose on your neck and then you just fall and that's it, you're done. If it goes wrong, you're hanging there for 6 minutes, dying. So at the very least, I think in this the poison scenario, at least it's certainly much more efficient than hanging.
Well, that was the thing, is that apparently there were 3 executions that took, one of them I think maybe took 40 minutes. So this whole how long can it take?
That's certainly more than a hanging.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound pleasant. And before I was much more like, that's too bad. If you killed somebody, who knows how long they suffered, and if you have to suffer, so be it. But with all the new cases now that we're not new cases, but all of the incidents we're finding where people were convicted and condemned and it turned out never to have committed that crime. Do you remember, Phil, when you covered a show a couple months ago, we talked about Mr. Ford, Glenn Ford, who was convicted of murder, served 30 some odd years. Then they realized, he didn't do it. And then he tried to sue, oh gosh, now the term is escaping me, but he wanted sort of restitution from the state of Mississippi for putting him away for so long when they shouldn't have. And they said, oh no, we're not going to give you any money because you were tangentially involved in the crime. You don't have clean hands. So we're not going to give you any restitution. We took 30 years of your life away. We're not going to give you any money. And then we found out the guy had cancer. And then just this week he died. So it's situations like that where this man he was the longest person ever to sit on death row, and then we find out he didn't actually do it. So it's cases like that are very scary about, are we willing to really put people to death in such a torturous way when we know that there's at least a small percentage chance that they didn't actually do it? So it makes me very hesitant to be supportive of the death penalty and a very painful form of death.
I think, for me, I think obviously there's a couple of things, right? If you're going to have the death penalty, then it has to be the same for everybody, right? The process and the qualifications and so on and so forth.
Personally, these convictions, man, these convictions are not, they go through 25 stages. I don't know how many stages of appeals. And sometimes people get all the way, their convictions are upheld, and they didn't do it. So I don't know if it's the same sort of standards being applied everywhere on convicting people and putting them to death. But if they were...
it just comes down to sort of... Schrodinger's cat. Do you want to just take that chance and open the box and see what the result? If you enact the death penalty on someone, you've sealed their fate forever.
Yeah,
by letting them, do life in prison.
Yeah.
Then they may or may not actually be guilty.
Well, one of the other reasons that one of the justices, the most conservative, I don't know if I'd call him the most conservative, but certainly very, very, very conservative. I think he's the most colorful languaged Justice Scalia said that we need the death penalty as a deterrent. I think the studies are showing it's not really working that well as a deterrent. And he also said it's not that good of a consolation prize. Like, how are you going to tell the parents of a child who was murdered, oh, the guy's just going to spend the rest of their life in jail? Really, he should die. I think that's a little projecting too much on what parents of murdered children would want. But he's saying it's a deterrent, and we need something really terrible to help the families of victims feel like there is some sense of justice.
I don't know about the families. I mean, I guess you can argue that. I think I do buy into the it could be a deterrent. It just has to be, not that you need it publicly. Fair enough. All right. Well, let us know your thoughts and opinions on the death penalty. Obviously, it's a very sensitive subject. Something, hopefully, I don't know if you're going to call it uplifting, but let's talk about, it's certainly not the death penalty. Let's talk about Obamacare.
All right. Well, this one, uplifting, and then, almost not so much. I mean, the idea behind Obamacare to cover more people with health insurance and to make it cheaper is a great idea. Didn't exactly have that effect on me, my premium, because I'm self-employed. I pay my own insurance. It doubled. And granted, I got a little bit more coverage than I had before, but it's not like I really use it. I try and take care of myself. That's no fun. I mean, and I like to, I'm using air quotes, cure myself at home with all the random things I find on the internet. No, I'm just kidding. I do a little bit more research than just the internet, but I don't use it very much. But it was upheld. Some challengers were looking for any reason to knock this law out, and they found four words that they wanted to challenge. And the words were, let's see if established by the state. Okay, so those four words were the center of this entire controversy. So here's how it works. I'm not sure if you know. So Obamacare, or Affordable Care Act, says that the states will set up their own exchanges where you can purchase insurance on. But if the state chooses not to do it, there's going to be a federal exchange that people can purchase insurance from if their state doesn't have an exchange. And if anybody can't afford it because of their income, there's going to be federal subsidies that help pay for it. And the challenger said that the words of the law, this phrase established by the state, means that the federal government could not provide subsidies to the people in the states that didn't have their own exchanges. So as it stands right now, 34 states don't have exchanges. And so the people that live in those states, those residents, have to go to the federal exchanges. And if this challenge had been successful, then those people in those 34 states would have lost their subsidies and would have made basically their health insurance null and void. So this affected or could have affected almost 6.5 million Americans. That's a lot of us in these 34 states, because those people would have lost their tax credits. And surprisingly, there was one very conservative judge and one justice who's the swing vote, the guy who's is conservative but sometimes goes a little more central or liberal, who decided that really, when you look at the whole law, it's clear that they intended to give subsidies to everyone, not just people whose states don't have exchanges. But that's what the whole brouhaha was about. It was about subsidies going to residents. And this is such a long and convoluted explanation, but I hope it makes sense about just how nitpicky these people are, going through the law, reading every last word, phrase, to see if there's something that can get this whole law tossed out.
So what's next steps for any? I mean, if you are in those 34 states or whatever, like.
So you keep getting your federal subsidies, and I know that the Republican Party hates this, and they want to, but now it's withstood, 2 Supreme Court challenges. I really wish that, the party who hates Obamacare would instead focus their energy on reducing the costs within the healthcare system, because their complaint is this system is so expensive, forcing people to buy insurance. It's not fair because it's so expensive. Well, why don't you do something about the fact that it is so expensive? And surely there's a lot that can be done. You would think that if everybody buys insurance, the price of it should come down, kind of like when you buy in bulk. You know, the price of the individual policy should come down. But I don't know what they're going to do, what approach that they're going to take. But, you know, this just means that Obamacare is here to stay. I don't absolutely love how much more money this is costing me. But if I think about it, this is kind of a long shot. But the story I think of is like, the price of my health insurance is partially set to account for other people who have different health habits. So I try and eat healthy and work out and take care of myself, but I still have to sort of pay the price a little bit for the people that eat fast food and don't ever leave the couch, and then they get high blood pressure, diabetes, and all these things that are killing Americans. So that's annoying that I'm like paying for somebody else's diabetes. But if somebody, let's say with diabetes, goes to the hospital, they get all this treatment, they get amputations and whatever, all this treatment, and then can't pay for it. And you get a bunch of those people that effectively like bankrupt a hospital. Like they can't stay in business because they treat all these people that then can't pay. Then let's say I have a car accident in that neighborhood where that hospital once stood, and it is no longer in business because nobody was paying them. Now, my life is again at risk because there's no local hospitals. They were put out of business by the fact that these people weren't covered by insurance, and so they never got paid for their services. So in order to keep all the hospitals open around anywhere that I might have an accident near or whatever, I guess I'm okay with paying a little bit more. I don't know if that makes sense or help people feel better about paying a little bit more. But I wish that, you know, how much I paid was tied to how healthy I was, kind of like your car insurance is tied to how good of a driver you are. But I'm not sure that we can work out a system for that, although I'd love it.
Yeah, it's tough because then there's, you know, again, there's unfortunately things that you can't predict at the end of the day.
Right, and things that people are born with. But I think even saving those things that people are born with, the things that have to do with our lifestyle, have so much more of an impact on our health than the issues that we're born with. So I don't know. I hope that I do know. I should stop saying I don't know, because I do know. I would like to see it somehow related to the choices that I make, and the fact that if I'm purposely trying to be fit and healthy, I should be in some way rewarded like good drivers are rewarded. Do you have good driving discount on your insurance, Phil?
Not at the moment. All right. Let's talk about housing discrimination.
Okay.
This has kind of been brought up
So
recently.
this one affects a lot of people, only because the decision seems to be so like wide sweeping, which is why a lot of people don't like it. I'm a little like, oh, I can see why it's good, and I can see why people would fear it. So basically what it means is that if you're denied, if you feel discriminated against in terms of housing, applying to be a tenant somewhere, applying for a loan, if you're a builder who builds, let's say, low-income housing for people, and you feel like you were discriminated against because you wanted... Let me actually see if I can make this a little bit easier. I'm even confusing myself. So the state of Texas was awarding money to contractors building low-income housing units in poorer areas and not nearly as many in the nicer areas. So they sued under the Fair Housing Act because even though you can't say that the state of Texas intentionally discriminated in where they were giving out money to, the effect of it you could see, and they call it disparate impact. So it's just the impact was discriminatory even though the intent wasn't. So it's really hard to tell.
I mean, it gets more
thinking.
So let me ask you this, like, because let's take any neighborhood, right? If let's say a typical house, 3-bedroom.
Okay, where are we talking?
I don't
LA or middle of the country?
Let's talk LA because I forgot middle of the country.
Okay.
So let's say 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 500.
Okay.
Right.
This is not anywhere near around here, but okay, nice.
What do you mean? That's
3-bedroom in LA for
Ish.
500?
Yeah, it's a little low, right?
Right. Yeah.
But let's take it at that. Maybe 1 bathroom.
Okay.
So you got 3-bedroom, one bath. Then I mean, how do you like? Because my question is just how does it work? You know, if one house is set at that, and like let's say you buy like. How do you set a lower price for something else? Like it's just set based off because it's all most of the land, right?
Yeah.
It's already pre-built upon.
Well,
certainly the areas that people want. I mean, you could go to Maine and buy an entire town.
This case doesn't
because that's cheap. No one wants to live there.
This case doesn't say that, if you are in a minority and you walk into Beverly Hills and you're like, hey, this place is too expensive for me. And if you look around, it's all, white people here. They're discriminating. They should price this such that I can buy it. That is not what this decision says.
Okay, so then what exactly is it? When when you're building?
Building, or let's say you are applying for a loan. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you want to take out a mortgage on a house. And there was one analysis that I saw was interesting. So let's just say we have 2 people with the same credit score. Okay, and one person wants to buy a place in, I don't know, what's a nice city around here?
Beverly Hills.
Okay, fine. We'll do in Beverly Hills. And the other wants to buy a house in, San Bernardino, which is got very low property values relative in the state of California. Okay, the bank can decide to approve one and not the other, even though they both have the same credit score and let's say even the same income. So it looks like people were being denied in San Bernardino more than they were being denied in Beverly Hills, and be like, well, that's not fair at all. I got the same income as that other person and I have the same credit score. Why was the Beverly Hills person given the mortgage and I wasn't? And people are like, well, so that's what the law wants to correct, is that mm-hmm. is that happening? So if those 2 people are the same qualifications, they should both get the loan. Okay. Then on the other side of that argument, people are like, well, no, but a bank has to weigh the consequences of the lender not paying. So let's just say that the Beverly Hills person defaults and that home goes into foreclosure. Now the bank
make the money back.
Exactly. That's the argument, is that if they get a house in San Bernardino, they're going to have a hard time selling it, or that it's not as valuable as an asset as the one in Beverly Hills. I think it's a bit of a stretch because you're supposed to also, you're looking at the price of the actual property when they take. It gets a little bit more complicated than that, but the point of this is that if you look around and it's like, housing policies are creating more segregation than integration, then somebody can sue for that. And that was the purpose of the Fair Housing Act, was to eliminate discrimination, and the effect would be to more integrate us. But policies are putting housing projects in lower income properties already, and therefore causing more of a divide, causing further segregation. And that's why I think the Supreme Court ruled that even though we can't point out to some really intentional discrimination, if you look at the situation and you can see, not just from statistical analysis, but you really look inside the policies that caused this disparate impact, then somebody could sue. It doesn't mean that somebody could actually win. You still have to prove that there was a policy and that you were discriminated against. But but it is enough to show the impact, not just the intent. So, obviously intent is a big deal in the law. We talk about intent all the time on the show, especially in criminal cases, and about what did a person intend to do. Like we talk, a lot about like Suge Knight. Did he intend to save his life, or did he intend to kill somebody when he ran somebody over? So this intention is a huge, huge deal in the law, and this case said intention is important, but also the impact, the ultimate effect is important too, and if the effect is discriminatory, you can sue.
Got it.
I hope that made some kind of sense.
Well, there you have it. The Housing Act
So
explained.
Hopefully you will never need to sue because you feel discriminated against, Phil. I'm not sure that can really happen to you. You're probably not in the protected classes here, but if you as a viewer or listener are, and you're like, I can't say for sure that they intended to, but if you look at my situation, it sure seems that I'm being treated differently, it is now easier to bring a claim.
Fair enough.
All right. I hope that helped make sense of this, of what's happening. It's been a very exciting week for us law geeks, and we hope that this makes you feel some sense of justice, or if you felt that there were non-justified decisions here, we'd love to hear your opinion on why that is.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us. You can follow Chelsea at
Chelsea Galicia.
There you go. And follow us here at BHL Online, Twitter, Instagram, and follow us at facebook.com/Black Hollywood Live. And of course, subscribe. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. You can subscribe on iTunes, you can subscribe on SoundCloud, or of course on YouTube to watch us. And for more great content, go to blackhollywoodlive.com. Thank you for joining us. Have a happy 4th of July.
From producers Maria Menounos, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire BHL crew, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I'm your BHL announcer, Scipio. Instagram me at Planet Scipio. Thank you for tuning in. The views expressed here are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.